haben wir Konstantinos Farsalinos im Bild aus Patras in Griechenland. Ich freue mich sehr. I'm very happy to have you here, Konstantinos, and that
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Everything turned out very well technically.
Yes.
And also timely. You've got another time zone. Konstantinos Farsalinos is a very, let's say, well-known researcher, and he has been quoted already during this webinar from several speakers. He's a very well-known researcher on tobacco smoke, e-cigarette handling, and many other things. And apart from that, he worked on a brochure, on a study called In Favor of Flavor. Yeah,
yes.
He will present results out of that. Sorry to just switch to German, just to tell the audience a little bit about why we choose the topic of flavors. Aromen sind in Deutschland ein sehr stark diskutiertes Thema. Auch das Bundesinstitut für Risikobewertung arbeitet derzeit an einer Studie zu der Vielzahl von Aromen. Nicht, glaube ich, grundsätzlich um Aromen zu verbieten, sondern eher um Aromen zu systematisieren und zu ordnen. Und die Ergebnisse werden wir möglicherweise bei der nächsten Konferenz haben. Dr. Farsalinos, currently in Germany, there's a study ongoing on flavors. And I think the idea behind that by the Federal Institute of Risk Assessment in Berlin, the final idea of that study will be probably to, let's say, to systematize flavors, not to forbid them, but let's say to put them in a systematic order, in order to be transparent, in order to be to give a more, let's say, structured picture of the situation of flavors. And this is exactly what you are speaking about today. And please take the floor.
Yes. So thank you very much for the invitation. I'm glad I'm seeing people that I know and we haven't met for a long time due to the pandemic. I'm going to share my screen.
Yes.
This is going to be my screen. And please tell me if you see the slide. Yeah.
Everything is fine.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk about flavors in relation to tobacco harm reduction products. As you know, the main issue is with e-cigarettes, but we are now starting to see other tobacco harm reduction products using flavors, including heated tobacco products and nicotine pouches. So it's quite a controversial debate, particularly for e-cigarettes, but I think it's going to expand to all harm reduction products. And it's a controversial debate because there are strong and frequently opposing views within the scientific community concerning the prospects and the impact of e-cigarette and other product use on smoking rates and on public health in general. And flavors have traditionally been a very hot topic. It started, and I fully agree with the issue that was raised with tobacco cigarettes, and they were banned. The main concern about flavors and harm reduction products is the protection of youth from vaping or other product use initiation, or of such initiation becoming a gateway to smoking. It's very common that we hear about gateway theories, that such products may result in smoking initiation in the future. Now, we've also, all of us have heard about a vaping epidemic in youth in the US, which I think is not really the case. And the reason why it's not the case is that most of e-cigarette use among US youth is experimental. And it is largely about adolescents with a smoking history who have used or are using tobacco cigarettes too. If you look at this analysis that we published a couple of years ago, analyzing the National Youth Tobacco Survey, a survey that is performed every year by the US CDC, you see that among never smoking adolescents, use of e-cigarettes is particularly rare. And if you look at frequent use or daily use, it's extremely, extremely rare. And that, I think, is a reassuring point. Furthermore, the theory of gateway to smoking is largely debunked when you look at smoking rates among US youth. the smoking rates have been declining particularly rapidly during the period of e-cigarette use rise in popularity. As I said, it's largely experimental. It doesn't appear from the data that e-cigarette use results in smoking initiation. I think we would have seen a slowdown or even a reversal of the reduction in smoking rates that we have been observing over several years. And even e-cigarette use among youth has been declining. I didn't update it with the latest data from 2022, which shows a small increase in past 30-day use. But still, if you look at 2019 and 2020, we are seeing a decline in cigarette use. So it seems that the less frequently we talk about the problem, the less likely US youth are using electronic cigarettes. So all these are very reassuring. However, the issue is, are flavors appealing to kids only? Because this is the main argument that we hear from mainly the regulators, but also several scientists, that flavors exist in order to attract youth, to attract kids and create a new generation of nicotine dependence. But that's not really the case. A very recent systematic review of 104 studies in adults, in adult vapors, found that two were the factors associated with adult cigarette, former and current cigarette and e-cigarette use, and that was the higher nicotine concentration and the access to the variety of flavors. And now you see that the authors report this as a higher abuse potential and appeal for e-cigarettes, and that may sound concerning, you know, when you look at the term abuse and abuse potential, but in reality, this is exactly what we want. We want smokers to find a product that they like and they want to use, and that's the only way that this product will be successful in substituting for smoking. Otherwise, you know, creating a product which is indifferent, boring, or flavorless, or with a bad flavor is not going to attract a smoker, is not going to help a smoker to quit smoking. And that's why the authors concluded that higher nicotine concentrations and the availability of a variety of flavors in e-cigarettes might facilitate complete substitution for cigarettes. And this is something that the regulators should carefully consider, because the regulators and several scientists tend to look at the potential adverse effects on public health, and they never look at the potential benefits. So they are missing the whole picture, and that can result in bad regulation and bad regulatory decisions. Now, flavors used by adult vapors. We know there are several cross-sectional surveys of e-cigarette users, adult users, many of them being former smokers, and we see that they're using a variety of flavors. The first cross-sectional survey that I performed was back in 2013, just at the time that the European Union initiated the debate for the current Tobacco Products Directive. But a very recent study that was published from scientists from the Penn State University found, which followed up vapors over a period of 5 years, found that although initially there was a high preference for tobacco and menthol or mint flavors, over time this preference decreased. So the use of these flavors, tobacco, mint, menthol, declined. The preference for fruit flavors remained stable, but the preference for sweet flavors like chocolate, candy, or other sweets increased significantly by more than 50%, almost 70%. And very importantly, the vast majority, almost all of vapors, were using more than one flavor on a regular basis. And only 11.2% reported that tobacco was their preferred flavor. So we are seeing that adult vapors, many of whom were former smokers, have a tendency to step away from tobacco, mint, and menthol flavors, which are more similar to tobacco cigarette flavor perception, and to move to sweeter flavors, which is, you know, something that probably helps them stay away from cigarettes too. So, and that's why the university released a press statement saying that it's not only teens, but adults also like electronic cigarette flavors. We submitted a few years ago a study that we performed on almost 70,000 US adult vapers, and we found that the single most often used flavor was not a tobacco flavor. It was fruit, sweet, dessert, pastry, or bakery flavors. And this shows that there is a trend for adult users to use non-tobacco flavors. And if you look at different groups, including switchers, dual users, former smokers, and never smoking e-cigarette users, they all show the preference to fruit, candy, or dessert pastry flavors. So it's not a coincidence. It's not a rarity that adults like flavors. And in a study, the first study that we published back in 2013, we found that the vast majority of users were using fruit and sweet flavors. Sweet were almost similar with tobacco flavors, but you see here that we also observed that most of the users were using more than one flavoring. And we try to explain this phenomenon because there is a phenomenon that has been observed long before e-cigarettes were invented, and that's olfactory fatigue. So when you are exposed to the same flavoring repeatedly, then the sensors, the flavoring receptors, and the olfactory receptors get desensitized. They get some type of tolerance. So you start not feeling the flavor. And that's why you need to switch to a different flavor so that the sensitivity of the receptors gets back to the previous state. And this is exactly what we found. Most of them, more than half of them, were switching flavors daily or even within the same day. And that's an important phenomenon which does not exist, as you know, with tobacco cigarettes. And this is not the only study. This is a study, sorry, that was released from the research group that is performing the ITC survey in 4 countries, in Australia, in the UK, in the US, and in Canada. And they found that sweet flavors were associated with a 61% higher odds of having quit smoking. So it's not something strange. It's not only kids that like flavors. All adults like flavors. You know, I don't think that any adult would like to eat or drink something that is flavorless. And we have even observed this with NRTs, with nicotine replacement therapies. So this is a study using a chewing gum, a nicotine chewing gum with different flavors. And the authors reported that they found that some flavors, in that case, apple, cardamom, and vanilla, were associated with a better, with lower chance of experiencing nicotine withdrawal. So they reported that using flavored gums in adult smokers may be a valuable tool in helping these smokers to quit. Now, we need to understand that, and that's a general concept about public health and harm reduction, that in the same way that the total harm is related to how hazardous a product is and what's the amount of exposure, harm reduction is also associated with both the level of reduction of the hazard associated with the product, but also the patterns of use in the targeted population. So what this means, in terms of reduced hazard, we are talking about reduced toxins, but in terms of use, we need a product that is attractive, appealing to the targeted consumers, which in our case are smokers. Now, with NRTs, we have a harm reduction product which is of substantially reduced hazard, so it is extremely low risk, but the problem is that it was not acceptable by smokers. So the use of NRTs by a smoker is very low acceptability and use. And that's why there was overall a very small benefit for public health. You know, it was an almost safe, absolutely safe product that no one wants to use. So you don't expect this to have any impact on public health. In the contrary, we have a case example of a country, of Sweden, but not only Sweden, I would say all Scandinavia, of using snus. And snus is a very low risk product, but not as low risk as NRTs. But especially among men, the big difference compared to NRTs was that they were very, very acceptable and people wanted to use, especially men want to use snus. And we all know what's happening in Sweden. Not only is the smoking rate extremely low, but also they have the lowest death rate in the European Union from cardiovascular disease, from lung cancer, and from cancer in other organs. Almost 2 times, or in some cases 3 times lower death rates compared to the average European Union death rate. And that's why the use of snus, which is not a perfect product, resulted in a significant public health benefit in Sweden because it was acceptable for smokers. So, and this means that, you know, of course, it's ideal to find the safest possible product, but if we don't look at acceptability of use, and if we don't look at what users, smokers in our case, want to use, you may find a perfect product that is useless in terms of public health. We need to also consider what people like, what they prefer to use. And that's why public health is always a compromise. So to conclude, flavors appear through the research also, but through our own personal experience. We are all adults. We like flavors in everything. Flavors are not appealing only to youth, but also to adults. And for adult smokers who are unable or unwilling to quit with currently approved medications, we need to have appealing smoking substitutes. Otherwise, they are going to be useless in substituting for smoking. We also need these less harmful alternatives, all harm reduction products, to have a competitive advantage over tobacco cigarettes, and flavors is one of the competitive advantages that these products can have. We, of course, need risk proportionate regulation, but this means that we need to look at the totality of evidence, and we also need to consider not only the adverse effects of the products, but also the benefits that can be associated with these products. We need to look at the total picture. So e-cigarettes and all harm reduction products are not simply consumer products for anyone to use, but they serve a role as smoking substitutes. And that's what we should always consider instead of punishing smokers with over-restrictive or prohibitive regulation. And the appeal of flavors among adult smokers and vapers means that a flavor ban would be similar to a de facto ban of especially electronic cigarettes, but it could also have other unintended consequences. First of all, it would create an uncontrolled black market of alternative flavorings coming from the food industry. There would be no quality standards and no control from the regulators. There is a potential of using harmful products, for example, food flavorings that are dissolved in vegetable oil, which are perfectly fine to be ingested, but not safe to be inhaled. And unfortunately, such a ban would prevent many smokers from quitting, but would also cause a relapse of several smokers into back into smoking. We have published a book back in 2017, if I remember well, about electronic cigarettes, and the chapter that I wrote has had a lot of information about flavorings, not in a very scientific language, so easily for anyone, even for non-chemists, to understand and to see what kind of compromise we're doing with flavors, also in terms of safety, because let's be honest, these products have not been approved for inhalation. They are generally, most of them are generally recognized as safe for ingestion. But, you know, we need to have this compromise because it's going to take many, many years in order to accurately assess the safety of all flavorings for inhalation. Up until now, I must say that we haven't seen any disaster, any catastrophe concerning flavors or other e-cigarette ingredients. The issue of EVALI, the e-cigarette or vaping associated lung injury in the US, it is now clear that it is basically a misnomer. It was not caused by electronic cigarettes or vaping. It was caused by inhaling illicit THC products, which in any case are banned in the European Union. And this should be a lesson for the regulators that we don't want to create a black market, because we don't know what's going to come out from a black market. It's better to have a regulation which is sensible, using common sense, a risk proportionate regulation, and have some control and quality standards. So thank you very much.
Many thanks, Konstantinos, for your very comprehensive overview of 4 flavors. Very interesting, and your data that most of the flavor users in e-cigarettes do use more than one flavor, either during the day or during the week. That is very important, and also your plea for, let's say, sustainable regulation, risk proportionate regulation, which is, let's say, sensitive to the benefits of flavors for public health, and that is very important in all discussions that are ongoing with the, let's say, the ban on flavors on a European level, and also this will swap also to Germany in the near future. So there are some questions to you, Konstantinos, if you've got some time. There's one from Mr. Henkler Stefani. Unfortunately, toxicological issues are increasingly raised against flavors. For example, menthol was claimed to trigger respiratory diseases in mice and proposed for prohibition in e-cigarettes in Germany. Have you heard?
There are many issues in translating laboratory studies, whether it's cell studies or animal studies, into clinical effects. I think we are seeing an over-exaggeration of trying to apply findings in animal models or in cell models into clinical effects. And we have seen that, with nicotine. Nicotine was supposed to cause atherosclerosis, cancer, whatever you can imagine. There are many reviews coming from laboratory studies, but we have long-term epidemiological data from, for example, snus use, with many, many years, large cohorts, tens of thousands of people, and we are not seeing any such effects coming from nicotine. So I would be very cautious in translating these laboratory studies into clinical effects. I don't think we've seen anything like this. Don't forget that we have essential oils that people are inhaling, some people over the long term because they suffer from several issues that need it. Of course, we are talking about daily use and about long-term use. We need to be cautious, but we should not also forget that we have more than 10 years now of experience with millions of users, and we haven't seen anything coming out from the use of flavored products, and almost everyone is using a flavored product. You will rarely find any user using unflavored products, a mix of propylene glycol, glycerol, and nicotine. So unfortunately, such studies can be used to support restrictive regulations. But as you mentioned, a risk proportional regulation is not something new. It's the basic principle of regulation for everything, for all our lives, for all our daily activities. We are not asking the regulators to do something new. We are asking them to follow the same principle for everything, and to also consider what's going to happen if they have a prohibitive agenda and a prohibitive regulation. There are many unintended consequences.
Okay, many thanks, Konstantinos, for clarifying that. And there's a nice comment from Norbert Zillatron-Schmidt. He said, will flavors be banned for saunas as well?
That's exactly what I mentioned. And, banning flavors, the problem with e-cigarettes is that you can't ban ingredients that are available widely for other products, because an important characteristic of e-cigarettes is that it doesn't contain any e-cigarette unique or e-cigarette specific ingredients. All the ingredients, propylene glycol, glycerol, flavorings, were coming and are used in many other products. from cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, whatever you can imagine. So it's impossible to ban an ingredient and expect that that this ingredient is going to disappear from the market. No, they will find it from other sources, and we may create a problem through the regulation, because in that case, it's going to result in uncontrolled use, as I mentioned. So the regulators need to be very, very careful in all their decisions, and they need to consider that there are alternative routes through which a user may have access to flavorings, and that may be bad for his health. So they need to consider all this. And in my opinion, the best advice is it's rather to have a well-regulated and well-controlled market rather than having an uncontrollable black market.
Mm-hmm. Okay, many thanks for stating that. Maybe my last question, would you be in favor of flavor, let's say, in a systematic way, that, let's say, for transparency for the consumer and for the regulators, let's say 10 to 20, the most used flavors will be clearly, let's say, be on the market, and others not, or would you? Currently, the market is flooded by hundreds of flavors. So, what do you think about?
You know what? This is the main characteristic of the flavoring industry. There are so many compounds and so many combinations that you can make that basically there is no limit. You can create an unlimited number of different combinations to create different kind of flavors. So I find this systematic approach of creating specific flavors to be non-realistic, in my opinion. Over time, we have observed that flavorings in e-cigarettes specifically are becoming more and more complex. And you understand that there are many companies want to create unique products, a unique experience, and that's why there are unique products. I think that having variability is very important, because unlike smokers who basically have a compromised olfactory sensation, and that's why they like this harshness, this very unpleasant smell and taste of a tobacco cigarette, e-cigarette users, especially those who have quit smoking, have a very sensitive olfactory sensation. And they also have very different preferences. So the variability, in my opinion, we have observed that, is there to satisfy the demand of adult vapers, many of whom have been former smokers. So I think that variability is key in attracting as many smokers as we can, and in helping as many smokers quit. I'll give you a characteristic example, discussing about flavors and youth, that my mother, who is 73 years old, she quit 5 years ago. So at the age of 68, she quit smoking with e-cigarettes, and she's using cappuccino and fruit flavors, and she's 73. So let's be honest, everyone likes flavorings in everything we consume. It's not only about kids. We need to consider that, coming from a 55 years smoker of menthol cigarettes, she doesn't use any menthol at all. And she couldn't quit with other methods. It was only with e-cigarette that she managed to quit after repeated attempts. So we need to consider these people, and we need to understand that flavors are there for everyone.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Konstantinos, for your plea for variability and the attractiveness of flavors for smokers. And the other way around, it is, let's say, a huge danger that if we prohibit, people will get back to smoking or will buy the flavors on the black market. Exactly. And these flavors are generally not illegal in general, but we use it for cuisine and for cosmetics and for many other things you mentioned already before. So, Konstantinos, all the best to you. We will proceed in German. All the best to you, and your mother. And your mother, by the way.
Thank you.
I hope to see you soon again, live and in presence, face to face.
Thank you for the invitation. Bye, everyone. Bye.
You will send the presentation to me, so we will.
Yes, I will.
Great.
Yes.
Konstantinos.
Great.
Have a good time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
So, das war Konstantinos Farsalinos finde ich, mit seinem überzeugenden Plädoyer für Aromen in den E-Zigaretten als ein Umstiegsmotivator. Und zu Recht sagte er, es gibt nichts Geschmackloses, was wir mögen, was attraktiv ist und deswegen eben tatsächlich Aromen eine ganz große Rolle spielen. Und wir sollten bei all dem bedenken, wenn es um das Verbot von Aromen geht, was die negativen Konsequenzen davon sind. Das fand ich sehr überzeugend.